Love Your Kitchen, Design in the Heart of the Home, proudly sponsored by Blum, the podcast where we explore the art of crafting your dream kitchen. I'm your host, Faye Newman, a freelance kitchen designer with a passion for creating spaces that truly reflect the heart of the home. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Love Your Kitchen podcast. As ever, thank you very much for joining me. So today's conversation is being filmed in this beautiful setting, which is Olive and Barr's showroom, which is called the Barn, which is in Tunbury Wells. And we've got this beautiful sort of London townhouse-inspired design to showcase for you today. And the reason why I wanted to sort of talk about this on the show to you guys is hopefully it just gives you a little bit of inspiration and a few sort of key design points that you can consider if you are looking to go for even like a timeless kitchen or maybe sort of a modern take on a timeless kitchen like this. I think it's really nice that we've got, lots of different colour combinations going on within this particular, style kitchen. Also as well, it's colour drenched. So I'll be talking through the ideology behind that and why it works so well in this space with these specific materials, so that hopefully by the end of the sort of episode, you've got some really great inspiration to take on into, your upcoming kitchen design or to finesse sort of the kitchen design that you're working on at the moment. So first of all, let's talk about the sort of the thought process behind the actual design that sort of Olive and Barr have here. So as I mentioned, it's inspired by sort of a London townhouse, which usually means you've got beautiful big tall ceilings, which is sort of showcased here as well. We've got beautiful, tall sort of skirting boards going around. We've got a dado rail, a coving at different points, another sort of rail going around. So it really just shows sort of the features of a period property and how sort of an in-frame sort of timeless kitchen like this one can sit so beautifully sort of within that space. And if it's a case of you have got a townhouse and maybe they haven't incorporated or they've got rid of those beautiful sort of period features, but you're looking to go back to like a timeless aesthetic in there, again, this would be a really good way, like not even just from a furniture perspective, but for the other points in the room, like redoing your skirting board so it's larger, having a beautiful detailed sort of architrave going around the door. As I mentioned, the different rails, the coving, things like that. That's a really great way of adding or re-adding the sort of the period features that would have been sort of involved in your sort of Edwardian sort of Victorian style houses. But I think the part of this design that I just absolutely love are the colours and everything involved. So to give you sort of a concept of what we've got pitch black on all of the sort of the furniture on the exterior. And then we've also got that on both walls and the ceiling. All of the skirting boards, the architrave, the dado rails, they're all in sort of the pitch black and encased round, and even down to sort of the frames fixed to the wall as well. Again, it just gives that really dramatic feel. Naturally, you've got other elements of the room sort of balancing this out. So you've got sort of a large sort of format brick tile for the flooring in a white sort of marble effect. So again, would work beautifully on like a larger scale. You've then got a similar shape, but on a smaller scale behind where the sink section is, which are these beautiful sort of bottle green metro tiles. So it gives the sort of vibe of like the London tube stations, that sort of thing. And I think because they've gone for a pitch black colour, it lends itself, it's almost got sort of a greeny undertone to it anyway. So it works really well when you're putting those sort of colours together. And then you've got sort of a quartz shelf and things to just balance out and add a bit of, lighter colours or key features sort of throughout the design, which again just works really well. If you are sort of looking at this scheme and thinking, what is it that I absolutely love about it? It might be the fact that they've just sort of colour drenched the space. So what I mean by colour drenched is it's not just a dark colour for the furniture, it's also the rest of the room, the ceiling, the walls, as I mentioned, everything. So it's quite a bold move to go for, and you don't necessarily have to go for this with a beautiful deep colour like this, but equally, if you want that drama or that statement, it just works really well. Also, surprisingly as well, colour drenching works really well in open plan sort of environments, purely because it adds a level of zoning, coziness in that one space, because there's no sort of boundaries to where sort of the ends of anything is. It's all really cohesive. It's almost like a cocooning effect, which is referenced quite a lot. It just means that the overall sort of room and illusion of the space just means that it creates like depth and drama, which is why it works so well. Something to note with if you're looking to go for darker colours within this sort of colour drenched environment is that darker colours actually absorb more light, which can cause the walls to sort of visually fade into the background. And so when a room is painted in a single sort of dark colour, the corners and edges become less distinct, blurring sort of the boundaries of the space. And this can give the impression that the walls are sort of farther away than they are. So again, creating a sense of greater depth and more expansive, almost like with the endless sort of feel. So and if you're looking to do this in maybe like a galley kitchen, or as I said, in a particular zone, it actually can make it look, you haven't got those boundaries or those restrictions, it can make it look bigger. And I think this is an ongoing debate with colour schemes and things too, especially sort of within a kitchen space. If you've got like a galley, really small kitchen, and you're thinking, God, we don't get a lot of natural light within that space anyway, but I love the look of this. It's definitely something to look into and think about, because there are other ways that you can add different lights within that room as well to create that depth, that drama that you're after. Also, what I love about sort of a colour drenched room is it's obviously a massive statement, but I think whatever you then add within that space that's a different colour, it just really emphasises the sort of colour tones. So a picture like this behind me, so it's got a black frame, a gold internal frame sort of within that, and then it's got a black picture section around it, and then quite a monochromatic with a bit of colour sort of theme going into the actual painting itself. But actually, if that was just on a white wall, you wouldn't probably notice it as much. It would probably sort of blend quite well into the background, but because you've got such a deep sort of backdrop and colour to work with, it really is brought out with it, the other tones in the rest of the kitchen. Same with this Belfast sink here. So naturally that's, a white ceramic sink. Again, pieced with the pitch black furniture and the sort of the quartz worktop that's on top of this, because they're lighter colours against sort of the pitch black or the bottle green tiles. Even though the bottle green tiles has the grout, again, it just makes it look more of a statement and more of a feature. And that is something else to think about actually, with your wall tiles, like when you are looking into different colours and things to go for, the grouting is another smaller design feature, but it's definitely something to think about. And I think even, you could go for a darker grout on here if you want to, but again, I just think the lighter grout really showcases the bottle green tiles, and you can really define sort of the external shape of those, again, which just works really well with the overall scheme. A top tip to think about if you are going for a painted kitchen is to make sure that, especially with a dark colour like this, is to make sure that the paintwork underneath it is a colour matched primer. So that's one thing that Olive and Barr have done great with their furniture. So they have several coats of sort of colour matched primer as a base, and then the top coat is obviously a similar colour to the primer. So actually, if you knock any of these posts, or if you've got it sort of going around a corner or on an island, and you're sort of thinking you don't want any of the exposed material underneath to show through, that's a good way of discreetly hiding the knocks and the scratches. Naturally, you might just still see them, but equally it just makes it a little less obvious for you. So that's something really big to note, especially if you're looking to go for the drama like in this space here. Again, it just works really well. Now, if we're looking into sort of what's actually within this space at the moment and what's working really well from a layout perspective. So we've got a back wall that is wall to wall with furniture. And what works really well with this design is you've got the sink cabinet in the middle against the wall. I would say that a lot of clients now are opting to go for the sink's actually against a wall as opposed to in an island. You can still go in an island, but you've obviously got to think about plumbing getting to there if you're looking to put your dishwasher next to it. The Belfast sink is a beautiful feature anyway, and that's centralised within that sort of, on the back wall. And then you've got dishwasher bin either side, so from a functionality perspective just works so well. And then you've got, two sort of drawer line cabinets either side with a dresser on the top of it. So again, you've got really great symmetry within this, and that's one of the benefits of going for wall to wall with furniture like this, and without sort of any sort of corners coming off it, is that you can get that exact symmetry either side. And I think what works well with this is because you've got the dressers the same side with the same sort of furniture underneath, then you've got a beautiful double chopping board and tray space underneath that. And then you've got a lovely sort of raised shelf just on top of the beautiful bottle green tiles that I mentioned. It just frames that space really well. And then alongside the sort of the back wall that we've also got a beautiful table, which apparently is called a baguette table. I've never heard of one of those before, but essentially it's a really sleek, beautiful long table. It's got drawers either side, which apparently are for baguettes, but equally the design of this lends itself so well to this style of kitchen. You've got really slender sort of legs tapering in at the end. It's in an oak colour, so it's in their sort of light oak sort of finish, which is also, I believe, available for furniture if you wanted to incorporate a natural sort of wood island or something like that. And then it's got a beautiful brass worktop on the top of that. So again, it just showcases and sort of, is cohesive with the other finishes within the space. Also, the long shape of this table adds, and the minimalistic qualities of this table also just lends itself to this particular overall scheme as well, because I think there's lots of detail with the fluted sink and lots of drama sort of on the back section. So this is your sort of focal point as you're walking into the room. So having a beautiful sort of simple sort of table setup like this, but in really interesting sort of colours and materials, again just works beautifully alongside quite a dramatic scheme. If you are loving the different material choices on this baguette table, I can completely understand why. I think the brass element just works beautifully with the rest of the scheme, but also what's really nice about this particular work surface is it sort of ages with you. So as I've mentioned on the show before, you can have like what's called like a living brass finish. And that's where, when you sort of, you're touching it and maybe you've got sort of plates and things on it, it will start to get darker in different areas. You might see sort of a few scratches. It just adds to the sort of the forever kitchen element and your kitchen sort of growing with you sort of over time, and just allowing the material to be the material that it is, and to define its own sort of colour tones and things over the years. So again, it just works really well. But also in this particular instance, it just works so beautifully with the hardware that we've got. So we've got cups and knobs again here. Again, they come in a sort of, you can get an aged brass sort of look, or you can get the ones that are like the living brass sort of finishes as well. So again, that would tie in really nicely with if you're adding sort of a brass worktop. Also, of course, you've got obviously the tap, but also you've got the beautiful lighting that's in this particular room as well. And we've got to give a shout out to these particular lights because they are beautiful. So these are some of Soho's lighting sort of statement lights, especially sort of the pendant in the middle here. The sort of the drama and the different textures and the size and the statement of this particular light just works really well with the overall scheme. Then pieced with the large sort of statement pendant, we've got the sort of the wall lights that come out, from the back section. Again, it just works really well with the shelf going all the way along. And also, I think from a design perspective, it just breaks up that wall because there is quite a big section of, the pitch black element. Again, it just adds a little bit of a definition, and it's a great way to sort of having the wall lights coming out. It's a great way to, again, make your design a little bit more personalised, as I always say, but also in quite an expansive space like this, it just works really well, and why it works so beautifully with the overall scheme. Also, I mentioned the Belfast sink earlier, but here's what we call sort of a fluted Belfast sink. So it's another detail that you can potentially think about. So when you've got a Belfast sink, you've obviously got the front that's shown, and the actual sink itself sits on a solid topped base cabinet like this. So it's a smaller base cabinet, double hinged underneath, and then you have your Belfast sitting on top of that. What's really nice about the sort of the ridge or the fluting effect, this is Shaw's one that they've got in this particular display, 800 mil, because sometimes you can get them bigger, is again, it just adds another design detail. And I think when you are going for the look of like a grand sort of London townhouse vibe, I think you have to push the boundaries at every point. So not only with the colour, the hardware choices, the lighting choices and position, of course, the different sort of worktop textures and things as well. Again, making the sort of the sink look different to the norm, having the flat-faced Belfast section here, again, just works well, and it adds another line and vertical into the whole scheme, so it works really well. This is a double bowl, so it's got two separate spaces. And then what's really nice is they've got the Bibri tap sort of behind in sort of the aged brass, but also the actual waste and the plug sockets are matching as well. So again, it's a really cohesive design, and it's design details like this that will take and elevate the design to the next level. Something else that I really think is fun about this particular design is, I've mentioned the two dressers either side, but actually the interior colour of these dressers are a really sort of bright sort of pink colour. And again, it isn't sort of referenced anywhere else in the room, but I think the pink, sort of the deep sort of pink undertone works really well with the pitch black and the bottle green element. And again, just adds a little bit of fun to those particular cabinets. I think adding sort of a pop of colour in a dresser is a really great idea, whether it's in clear glass like this or whether it's threaded. But especially if it's sort of a display cabinet or like a statement cabinet. So say if you've got sort of like a gin bar, or, you know, you want to pop some, you know, glasses, or you want to make it quite a showcase piece within your kitchen. Again, that pop of colour just works really well there. So again, it's something to think differently about when you are starting to, you know, look at the finer details of your kitchen design, because it really does make a difference. Other ways that you can finish the interior of your cabinets as well is you could also sort of colour drench the inside of there with the pitch black elements, and then go for sort of like the T&G paneling like they've got at the back here. If you wanted to, you can. They've chosen to go for glass shelving in here, which again looks really elegant, especially with the clear glass, because then you don't see the thickness of the 18mm coming through. Some people still prefer the proper shelves. Other people prefer, you know, having it look a little bit more elegant like this, especially if it's not sort of everyday sort of tableware, things like that. If it's from a display purposes, or as I mentioned, like glassware, if it's like for a bar or something like that. The overall sort of look and having that both sides, again, just works really well within this design. If you are sort of looking at this design and thinking there's a few appliances missing, you're absolutely right. Of course, because this is a display, they can't always feature absolutely everything. So let's talk about what would work really well, you know, to suit the ideology of sort of the, you know, the London townhouse that we're referencing throughout this episode. You could, you know, change this baguette table or move this baguette table sort of down if you've got a big, beautiful sort of open plan sort of kitchen diner or kitchen diner sort of lounge area, and have a lovely island in the section here. You could almost sort of raise the island if you wanted to, so have, you know, a gap underneath it, and that's really popular with maybe some drawers, or sort of imitating sort of a baguette table again, but at the same height as the furniture. You might be wanting to do a setup like this, but maybe you're in like a galley kitchen or quite a small space. So if you're wanting to include, you know, ovens, hobs, things like that, you could, you know, incorporate that. Again, symmetrically, maybe mirroring the opposite side, or having your side-by-side ovens on the one side and then having your fridge and then your freezer on the other side. Again, it just imitates the sort of, how you can make it look a little bit more symmetrical. It might be a case of you need to add sort of an L shape onto this design. So again, as I mentioned before, one of the key parts as to why the two dresser sort of setup works so well in this space is because it's wall to wall. So you've got to think, if you've got to add sort of a return onto this, you've got to think about the depth of that return, and then how that sort of fits in sort of with the rest of the scheme. It might be a case of you put two dressers together, or it might be a case of you could have sort of your stacked oven tower, fridge freezer, whether that's like an American fridge freezer, or personally, especially with this style of kitchen, I would go for tall integrated doors, and have those sort of hidden away, and then again colour drenched in the same colour scheme that we've got everywhere else. And then maybe in the corner you could have a section where it's like a dresser with a pop of colour on the inside if you want to, or have that as a working dresser on like a single bifold, just to enhance the functionality of the space in the corner. Again, that would work really well. As I've mentioned, sometimes as well, you can also do the Belfast in the middle. So if you're concerned about how the extraction is going to work, maybe you don't want to go for like a venting hob where the extraction is encased sort of within the hob. Maybe you want to go for a beautiful range cooker or something like that, which again would warrant this style of kitchen really well. Maybe you'd switch this around so you have the sink on the island, with the sort of dishwasher and bin setup here, and then the beautiful reference to obviously the sort of the antique brass sort of look to break up that space too. But also then that allows you to have room to have a range cooker at the back, and then you could still have maybe like a mantle section coming down from the ceiling with a big deliberate cornice sort of going around the sort of encasing the bottom of that, and then showcasing the Metro tiles. So again, that would be a way that you could potentially incorporate the other sort of appliances needed within this space. Also as well, it might be a case of you have what's called a peninsula, which is like an extension. So say if we go in an L shape all the way around, it's an extension sort of coming off the one side of the room. If you are in a townhouse, and maybe space it's maybe not limited, but you've got a certain size of table to fit in, or maybe sofa, sort of soft furnishings element, you've got to think about how big a space you've got for that. And maybe when you've actually looked at the whole design, you're sort of like holistically, you're sort of thinking, oh, actually, okay, maybe we haven't got the scope to have a full-on island. A way to still get that sort of third prep space would be to push that up against sort of the L-shaped run coming all the way around and have what's called a peninsula. And I've worked with clients before on this where they were like, I have to go for an island, but sometimes it just does not work in the space. And with their particular room, it was a townhouse actually. So again, a great reference to what we're talking about today. But basically they had the length because they've extended out, which is amazing, but actually the width of the overall room, they were quite limited because they wanted cabinet depth. They had to think about cabinets either side, a walkway obviously around the island, and then leading on to the length of the room. So for them, we looked at a couple of designs and I was like, look, I really would strongly not advise to go for an island in this particular space. And then we went for the peninsula and they've never looked back. So even though they were so wedded on having an island, sometimes, the peninsula is just the best route to go down to make sure that even if you have got beautiful tall ceilings like this, to make sure it's not looking too cluttered and too sort of compact within that room. You've got to make sure you've got an equal sort of a great flow walking around the space. You're giving yourself enough room. You're making sure that obviously all of your cooking area is in one place, your wet area, where you're cleaning, things like that is all in one space as well. And you're not sort of walking around this massive island all the time and it's just not working for you. So again, that's something to sort of think about if you want to go down that route. And it might be a case of, say, if you're thinking, Faye, we haven't got the room or scope to have the L shape going all the way around. Maybe you've got a doorway that leads into a utility and you don't fancy sort of making that sort of a secret door. that's fine as well. You can still have a peninsula just coming out from one side of the wall. So again, that can be really popular. If you've got a long run at the back and then you've got your small peninsula coming out, of course, you've got to think about the positioning of both your hob and your sink in that particular format. So I'd probably have either maybe your hob, I'd probably put your hob actually, if it's a smaller peninsula coming off from the wall, on that section, and then keep your sink at the back, or trying a way of putting the sink and the hob on the same back wall, and then maybe just still incorporating, you know, a shelf in the middle, and then, you know, having your wall cabinetry in certain areas where needed. Every room is different, so it's hard for me to be like, yes, this specifically will work really well for your space. But again, if you just think about it logically, I think try and keep it as symmetrical as possible, and then just work on, like this design has so well, the just features of the room. So knowing that, you know, it is the townhouse, going for, you know, beautiful tall dresses, like that works really well. Like going for the different color schemes and details that we've spoken about, making a big statement on that back wall. If you've got any sort of decorative lighting, or, you know, these beautiful sort of, you know, glossy handmade sort of tiles at the back, again, it just draws your eye to that space. So it's just logically working around, okay, thinking, what do I actually need to, you know, from an appliance perspective, to have in that space, and then just going to town, and, well, quite literally, because obviously it's a townhouse, and just, you know, seeing where else you can add a little bit more detail. And it might be a case of you add lots of detail everywhere and you're sort of thinking, okay, we've gone a bit too much on here, and you need to take a layer off, and you're thinking, okay, what are the key points to the particular aesthetic or overall aesthetic that I'm wanting to create within this scheme. And this is where you might have, you know, a love for interiors yourself, or it might be a case of you're thinking, Faye, I'm very logical, like, you know, I don't have a creative bone in my body, I just have no idea where to start. But this is where the expertise of working with your designer really comes into its own, especially with, you know, bringing the whole scheme holistically together. I think that's where, you know, our experience and then your sort of needs and your habits of how you use your space at home, and maybe your wish list, how that combination, you know, goes really well together. And also just be brave. I think this display really showcases that you can go really brave and it can still look like a really beautiful, timeless kitchen. I think if I saw this kitchen, you know, in 15, 20 years time, I still think I would love it the same. I wouldn't think, you know, it's a certain trend that they've tried to follow. I think it's, you know, pretty much evergreen in its approach. Again, because it's, you know, sophisticated color scheme, and also it just works with the period features in this pretend property, you know, really well. So again, I think that's why, from a design perspective, you look at it and think, wow, you just got that statement and it just works so beautifully. That's all for today's episode. So I'm hoping that, you know, these specific sort of design features have been really helpful for you. Of course, as I always say, if you've got any questions, or maybe you're like, Faye, this has really inspired me today, I would love to hear, you know, your thoughts, and how you're going to use this within the space. Or equally, if you've got any questions, just comment on our social posts or drop us a message to let us know, one, how the show is helping you for your kitchen design, but two, if you've got any questions that you want us to answer on the show. So I'm hoping this episode has helped you today. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you have liked what we have spoken about, why not like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, what you can do is click on the notification bell to keep yourself notified of all the new content to come.